And I'd like to ask this body for just a moment to remember something that there are probably many people that have never heard of the first time. Because for whatever reason, a bit of America's past seemed to just disappear from memory as soon as it occurred. So let me take us back almost 100 years for a moment. May the 30th of 1921, a young man named Dick Rowland, who worked downtown, African-American gentleman, was 19 years old. He was actually shining shoes in downtown Tulsa, which if you've ever been to Tulsa, and if you've missed it, if you've never been there, you need to go. It's an absolutely beautiful town. But like every other town in Oklahoma in the 1920s, it was also segregated by law. Working downtown in Tulsa, most buildings in Tulsa downtown wouldn't allow a black man to go to the bathroom there, but the Drexel building would. And so he would go to the Drexel building to be able to go to the restroom. He would get on the elevator because the restroom that he was allowed to use was up in an upper floor. And that particular day on May the 30th, 1921, he got into the elevator, and the elevator operator was a 17-year-old young lady, white lady, named Sarah Page. Now the elevator doors closed, and as they got to the upper floor, they got off. And at that point, Sarah Page screamed. To this day, we don't know why. By the time the afternoon paper had been released on the 31st of May, 1921, the word was out that a young African-American male had raped a white female in the elevator at the Drexel building. And a mob began to form outside of the courthouse. Some white men in the crowd confronted some of the African-American men as they left. And there was a struggle as one of the white men tried to take away the guns from the African-American men, and a shot was fired. And the rest of it was chaos. Looters and rioters moved through that part of Tulsa all throughout the night and into the next morning, literally looting every home, looting every business, doctor's office, grocery store, department store, looting each one of them and then burning them to the ground. By the time the National Guard arrived the next day to stop the riot, almost every building, home, business, everything in a 1 mile square that was the Greenwood district before was completely destroyed. No one was ever charged with a crime. Dick Rowland that I mentioned before was released from jail because no charges were ever pressed on him. Sarah Page never pressed charges against him. 95 years ago this week, the worst race riot in American history broke out in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And in 5 years, the entire country will pause and will look at Oklahoma and will ask a very good question. What's changed in 100 years? What have we learned in 100 years? I would say a few things. I have to remember, recognize, and respect, and that's reconciliation. What are we going to do as a nation to make sure that we're reconciled? Now, this simple speech on this floor is not going to reconcile our nation. And we have for years said this is something we need to talk about. Well, quite frankly, we do need to talk about it, but we also need to do something about it. What can we do to make sure that our children do not grow up in a nation that forgets their past, but also make sure it's not repeated again? To make sure all individuals are recognized and respected, and that every person has the same opportunity.